right, so we're here with Suburb. Why don't you tell me about how you got that name?
I have a large family, and they always refer to me as LJ because my father's name is John, and I'm the third. So they, instead of calling me Little John, they would call me LJ. My mom, I guess, always kind of had this inclination that I would be, I guess, a public figure one day of some sort, and she came up with the idea to stylize it as ELJAY. So I kind of just took that, ran with it. And then as far as Suburb, which I use as my alter ego, that came about as other artists' influence, that they kind of had two sides to them, and so I kind of felt that I liked that, and I wanted to come up something of my own.
So how long have you been into hip-hop?
Okay, this goes back to when I was about 7 years old, I would say. I can remember distinctly my mother busting in my sister's room and catching me in there blasting Snoop Doggy Dogg, through my older sister's boombox. She was heavily into hip hop, and that's where I got my initial introduction to it. And she yelled at me to turn that off, and I remember my sister getting in a lot of trouble for allowing me to hear that music, and I loved it. I didn't really know what everything meant at that age, but I guess there was that rebellious aspect to it, with a lot of really suburbia. I mean, there's a lot of people. I think that hip hop comes from the inner city, and that whole hip hop culture is not sheltered by any means. They've seen a lot more. They're exposed to a lot more, and in the suburbs, oftentimes we're more protected and not, we don't see all of that stuff, other than in movies and from what we hear in music and stuff like that. So it was all very shocking. Like, wow, there's this whole other world out there, and for me, I kind of had, I want to say, the environment already kind of set up for me. So I mean, I had a very impressionable mind, and the music really influenced me. It hypnotized me. The freedom that these rappers had to say whatever they wanted. I just remember, like, my sister. I remember her always telling me, like, she kind of like guided me a little bit in hip hop. Like, she would tell me about Tupac and Biggie, and the whole East Coast West Coast beef, and what was going on with that. She always wanted to kind of keep me ahead of the game. Most kids, I mean, other 7-year-old kids weren't really listening to hip hop.
Yeah.
So it just kind of shows that I was not as sheltered as maybe as some of the other suburban kids.
Who were your biggest influences then? Who were your biggest influences that encouraged you to become an artist?
Yeah, so like I was saying, I listen to all kinds of music. I never discriminate. I mean, even everything from country, rock, blues, jazz, rap, you name it. If I liked it, I liked it. Immediate family was always blown away by how, like, I was able to hear and kind of regurgitate everything. I knew, like, every word of, like, all the Notorious B.I.G. singles. And this is even before I had made my mind up that I wanted to be a rapper. This was like maybe around 5 or 6 years old, and I mean, the radio edited stuff, and I would just rap along, and it would just amaze them, and because it amazed them, I guess it kind of it got me excited to want to do it and think that I could actually do it. And so then that's what really got me more and more intrigued by it. And then, like I said, I came across Doggy Style, 1994. And
It's a classic.
That right there was, I would say, the album that really what I made that decision that this is what I want to do. By the age of 10, I was writing little doo-doo rhymes, as we people would call them, on Post-it notes, and they were just simple, nursery rhymes. From there, I then got my first beatbox. My parents bought me a beatbox, and I just remember I'd make beats, and then instead of writing, I would rap over the beats that I made, and I would record it all with an old tape voice recorder, and just talk about terrible sound quality. It was my parents had actually bought it for me to record the teachers at school, and hip hop had me so in this other element that I already made up my mind what I want to do. I only want the basics from school. I wasn't it's not that I wasn't capable of excelling in school. It was just that I had other interests. So I talked about Tupac and Biggie. I mean, who doesn't, right? And how my sister broke it down to me about this East Coast West Coast. Because I grew up on the East Coast, I sided with Biggie. Like, I got caught up in the hype even as a child. Like, I was told like that. Either way, I knew both were to be respected. Like, they're the real ones, so to speak. If I'm going to emulate anybody, it should be them. If I'm going to study their craft, they're the ones. But I did side with Biggie because I felt that he was very good at storytelling. I mean, he had covered all the bases, but the one thing he didn't do that Tupac did was touch on social issues as much. He didn't have that Black Panther background, which at the time, I was too young to really understand all of that and the difference of that. And I was so caught up in the fact that he's West Coast and I'm maybe not supposed to really be listening to that. So when I got older, I was able to appreciate and respect Tupac more, even more so than Biggie, and for that reason. Because at that point I learned about, really just how powerful music is and the influence and having that platform and using it as my outlet to be able to say my own views on the world, my own perceptions, in both a creative way, politically. I had a lot to say when I was a young kid. Like I was like, in some ways I was a little ahead of my years. And then I remember I got this phone call from a cousin of mine, and she said, LJ, you got to come over here right now. There's this guy on TV and he raps. You just got to see him. And I'm like, okay, fine, I'll be over in a little bit. So I go over there. I'm probably 11 years old at the time. And she turns the TV on. It's MTV TRL. I think they actually just brought this back. So to the new generation might not know what that is, but they just brought it back on air. And that was the after school special. You always watched that when you got home from school. It was just the thing. And all I remember is, hi, my name is, and I was like, no way. Like, my influence up until that point, I mean, that even showed me or even opened a window for me was Vanilla Ice, maybe, and Beastie Boys. But as a solo act, probably Vanilla Ice. And, he got played out of the game for not having any, points and stripes, as they say. You know what I mean? He didn't have any street credibility. And so my idea was that I was gonna set out and do that. I was gonna set out and figure out ways to get that respect in hip hop, no matter what I had to do. And like I said, I had that environment already around me, and as far as my extended family goes, living in bad neighborhoods and stuff like that. So it was easily accessible to me to put myself in maybe places I didn't belong. But I was like a sponge. I just soaked everything up, and I'd bring that back to the suburbs, and that's how I got my name, Suburb. My alter ego is because a lot of my peers didn't really understand where I was coming from and why I wanted to do this so bad, and they didn't take me seriously. And because of that, I caught a resentment about it, actually. And Suburb was actually an insult to me. People used to insult me by calling me Suburb because it was a reminder that you're from the suburbs. You don't have the, you can't do this. You're, not only are you white, and that's a, black art form, but you're also from the suburbs. You don't have a rags to riches story to tell. You know what I mean? And that just set me off even more. So I was like, you know what? I'm gonna prove them all wrong. Let me show them wrong. You know what I mean? And therefore, I'm gonna rock with that. I'm gonna call myself Suburb, and that's gonna be the wild, crazy, mad rapper. All my anger and all of that, all that's the negativity I'm gonna channel through Suburb. So it was kind of like a spit back at your face, like, yeah, I am Suburb, and this is what I'm all about. And LJ has always been, but my mom named me, so it's like that was the I'm still a good kid, the part of me that I didn't want to lose, the real me that people made me feel like I had to be somebody else just to make it.
So Eminem was a big influence of yours when you first started out in hip hop. How did listening to him make you feel?
I hate to admit it, to be honest with you. It's funny they call him Shady because sometimes I feel like he kind of threw shade on me at times. Because I was at 11 years old, I was envious and jealous. I wanted to be where he was at. What he was doing was what I was already starting to manifest in my head. And I looked at my cousin at the time, and I was like, she's like, that's just like you. Oh my God. And it was cool. At the same time, though, not so cool. Deep down inside, I was like, yeah, but that's not me. You know what I mean? And so, but I could tell that this guy was going to be huge. I mean, if I believed in myself and what I was thinking would work, this guy's doing it. And so I kind of had faith in what he was doing and that it was probably going to work. He was very controversial and all of that. So, but I put it aside and I was like, all right, I'm gonna try to study and watch everything he does and really emulate him. And there was two big things that I picked up from him. One was that I remember, I think it was probably in an interview, he said something about reading the entire dictionary. And two was he wrote a rhyme a day every day. So, I took that as a homework assignment, and that's exactly what I did. And I did that from the age of 11 up until, I would say, 21, my young adulthood, when life hit in, and, life showed up. Things got kind of crazy for me at that time, and hip-hop started to take a back seat, and it was killing me on the inside. But I was caught up in other things.
So what was your first studio experience?
You know what? I actually didn't get into the studio for the first time until I was 19 years old. Why I waited that long? Simply because I, didn't know I didn't know where to go. I didn't have a studio to go to. I didn't know if I was ready for all that. I was still very much just writing rhymes in a notebook. And, I knew my music sounded to me better than a lot of the stuff that was out there. And I mean that in a humble way. I don't mean that in an egotistical way. It's just that I felt that it was up to par, and that I had just as good of a shot as anybody else. And so one day, a buddy of mine, he said, Jay, like I had a lot of little aliases. He said, Jay, my buddy Anaki, he does producing out of his house. So I think it was that night I went there with him and with a big old bottle of E&J, and we were in there, we were partying, drinking, smoking weed, and which, by the way, was a play on my alter ego Suburb. It's kind of a play on words. I was big on smoking weed at the time, so I didn't know what the heck I was doing, and they told me to step up to the mic, and I had prepared a little something that I was gonna spit, and it turned out to be the hook. I called it the track Philadelphia. I basically was just spitting bars the same way that I did. It mainly, a lot of people find it hard to believe because I'm from the suburbs, but I used to go on the other side of the tracks, and not just South Philadelphia, but also West Philadelphia. And I would be like the only light skinned guy out there, one of the few. And it's funny because we always say, there's only two type of white people out there, either the ones that are copping or the ones that are cops. So I wasn't there for either or. I was there to actually hang out with the corner boys and freestyle, and that's what we did. Philadelphia has a very strong, I want to say, a very strong presence of battle rapping. People from all over America, they know that we're known for that, and it's very gritty, grimy, in your face, and you could check the Smack DVDs, that goes into further. So yeah, I remember get invited to different block parties, stuff like that, and I'd freestyle with other guys, and they'd say, be like, yo, LJ, yo, bust a rhyme, let me hear something, let me hear you spit some. And they would all be like, oh, you gotta hear him. So I got in the studio, I said a bunch of stuff that I had, a couple bars I had or whatever, and my man, Anaki, the producer, my very first producer, he worked his magic, he mixed it, and I played it in my car, and I was like, it just reaffirmed everything. This is it. I loved it. I loved it. I'm like, why didn't I not get in the studio sooner? This is it right here.
So how long after that first studio experience did you get back to the studio?
Almost immediately. His studio was shot up, and he moved down to down south here in Atlanta, Georgia. So, perfect timing for me. Just now having found a place to record at. Now I'm without a place. So I remember I was at one of the Asian corner stores, and I was in there with a fake ID trying to buy alcohol, and as I was doing that, I overheard the person behind me talking about, and he's like, I gotta get back to the studio, over to the studio, blah, blah, blah. And so I turned around and I said, studio, and he just looked at me like, yeah, I rap. And I said, oh, really? I do too. I'm looking for, I need a place, I need a studio, I need somewhere that I can record at. Do you know of a place? And he goes, yeah, right across the street. And I'm like, nah, get out of here. And he's like, yeah. So I got he had a business card. He gave me a business card. The place was called Jungle Lab Studios. And I, ended up booking some time there. And this was a step above from where I was before. It was still in a row home, but it was set up like a real studio. And that impressed me. But it was definitely within my budget still, which was great. How I obtained my funds, could have been questionable. Allegedly I sold drugs, but that's neither here nor here. Neither here nor there. I had money and I put it all into that, and I started to create a mixtape, and that was my primary focus. And when I first started out, like I said, I knew nothing. I just went in there, had my notebook, my rap notebook, and I read. I read it out over the beat. I picked the beat and I just read over it, and that's exactly what it sounded like. It sounded like I was just reading off a piece of paper, and I didn't know anything about cadence or flow or anything, because I started off as a freestyle battler. You didn't have to have that. It was just like aggressive. It was beefing. It was just like you're in each other's face. Aggressively. I remember fights breaking out over that stuff, and people going to the trunk, and just a bunch of knucklehead shit, like just young bullshit. So I didn't know how to actually create a song, make a song. But this producer that I was working with at the time, he tried to start showing me, but I was too busy. Hip hop gave me definitely a big head, and it was just because it's so competitive that you almost have to be like, I'm the best, and because of that, I couldn't hear nobody else. I was hard headed, and so I didn't. He was willing to help me every way, like how to write, I know it, I got it all, and I'm too busy, in there partying it up, and I'm doing more of that than I am actually getting anything accomplished. I'm too busy, partying.
What was your next studio?
Where I currently am right now, the Vibe Recording. And since then, I'd say I've been here probably recording for the past 3 years now. And, I've actually been able to get some stuff accomplished, and here I am giving an interview. There's a point. When my life started to look so bleak, and to be here now doing this, it's really just mind blowing. I'm at a loss for words. There is no word to explain, knowing where I came from and where I'm at now. I wouldn't change a thing though, because it made me who I am today. I definitely got those experiences that I wanted, not that I wanted those things to happen to me, but gave me certainly a lot to talk about. It gave me a story to tell, that's for sure. And and hopefully something that other people can either relate to or become enlightened to, and do better than me. So yeah, here I am.
Where do you see yourself in the future? What's your dream?
Where every other rapper wants to see themselves in the future. I want to be successful. Of course, I want to have my voice heard. I've outgrown those ulterior motives. The perks that come with it. The money, the fame, the girls. But I was never driven by those things. So I'm back and focused, and I'm able to separate a real everyday life, being a human being, not larger than life. I'm just like you or anybody else, and I don't see that these days. It's just so superficial in the industry right now. If you ask me the current state of hip hop, I couldn't tell you. I really don't listen to it. I'm not a hater. I don't hate on it. I think that nobody's wasting nobody. Everybody's needed, and take it how you want it. I think that some of that stuff out there is fake, and I think that it's necessary. I actually applaud it, because I think that you need to see fake in order to know real.